In the glamorous world of Hollywood, Gene Hackman was once a legend. With iconic roles in films like The French Connection and Unforgiven, he wasn't just an actor, but a man who embodied a golden age of cinema. However, after 40 years in the spotlight, Hackman abruptly retired, stepping away from the limelight without a farewell, without a round of applause. And from that moment, the story of his silence, his betrayals, and the untold secrets began. In this video, we will explore the secrets behind Gene Hackman's sudden death, the financial troubles he left behind, and why a legend was forgotten by both Hollywood and even his own family. Was his death due to old age, or is the truth behind it even more terrifying? If you find this content interesting, leave a 1 in the comments, and if not, leave a 0. Don't miss out on more intriguing content. Be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. Gene Hackman's daughter now quietly utters spine-chilling words, as if peeling back the decaying layers of a legend shattered in the glory that he himself had built. No dramatic cries, no deep mourning. Leslie Hackman's strange, confused, and uneasy reaction shattered her already fractured family, sending chills through the public and turning news-hungry reporters into ravenous vultures. Gene Hackman passed away in a cold house filled with the stench of toxic gas. But the biggest surprise wasn't his death. It was the silence that had lasted for 2 decades, finally broken when Leslie spoke out. The daughter who once lived behind closed doors is now a living witness. Instead of mourning with each word she speaks, like a knife peeling back a dirty truth no one dared to touch, Leslie Hackman has turned Gene Hackman's legacy into a nightmare, transforming it into a corpse. Behind her cold eyes and strange words, Leslie Hackman is hiding a dark secret. Gene Hackman, who once ruled the Hollywood silver screen with iconic roles in The French Connection, Unforgiven, Bonnie and Clyde, and Superman, was a regular on the covers of the world's most prestigious magazines. He strolled down red carpets, received roaring applause, and basked in flashing lights, attending lavish parties that lasted until dawn. But after 2004, Hackman suddenly disappeared without a formal retirement announcement, never appearing at press conferences or award ceremonies. It was as if Hackman vanished into thin air, his name only mentioned in anniversary articles or lists of Hollywood legends. He then retreated further into silence, allowing the passage of time to pull the legend of his own name away from the spotlight of Los Angeles. Hackman and his 31-year younger wife, Betsy Arakawa, chose Santa Fe, New Mexico as their sanctuary, a $3.8 million home nestled among the majestic mountains. No lavish parties, no paparazzi lurking, just the 2 of them, 3 dogs, and afternoons passing quietly. Neighbors in the Santa Fe area reported that they rarely saw Hackman leave his home in the mornings. People often spotted him holding a cup of coffee, sitting on the porch, gazing out toward the distant mountains. The once imposing figure in a sheriff's uniform was now just a frail old man with deep-set eyes filled with secrets yet to be revealed. His life seemed like an old film playing in slow motion, with each scene, each fragmented memory replaying every time he closed his eyes. Betsy Arakawa, the woman whom Hackman's family had initially doubted when they first married, ended up being the one who stayed by his side the longest. She cared for Hackman with the patience of an experienced nurse, attending to each pill, each meal. But was that love truly pure? Or was Betsy like their house in Santa Fe, a safe fortress, yet also a cage that trapped Hackman's inescapable loneliness. Close friends who visited Hackman recall that he seemed to have become a completely different person after his retreat from Hollywood. He spoke little, avoided discussing his career, and never revisited his own films. New scripts sent his way were promptly rejected by Betsy. In a recent interview, Hackman confessed, "I haven't watched my films in years. They're part of the past. They're not mine anymore." For 20 years, from 2004 to 2024, Hackman lived like a ghost. While his body remained, there were no grand events, no public appearances. The only time he was spotted was in 2023, when paparazzi captured a moment of Hackman and Betsy visiting a modest seafood restaurant. He appeared noticeably thinner, clinging to his wife's arm with each step. Yet that appearance, the same one that had once struck fear in Hollywood during the French Connection, still radiated a certain brilliance. Neighbors recount that Hackman's house was often closed off, but on some late nights they would occasionally hear small arguments. No one knew the content of these exchanges, but it seemed that Betsy always ended the conversations. No one dared linger near the house for too long, as there was an eerie energy that emanated from it, an energy that was both dark and unsettling. For 21 years, there were no public images of Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa. The absolute silence acted as a velvet curtain, closing a chapter of legendary stardom while fueling countless conspiracy theories. Some believed Hackman suffered from depression after the spotlight faded, while others suspected that Betsy isolated him from the outside world to control his fortune. Whatever the reason, Hackman chose to live in silence, as if he wanted to erase his name from Hollywood's history. Everyone in Hollywood understood that disappearing didn't mean being forgotten, but for Hackman, it was a choice. He refused all interviews, even turning down honorary invitations like the Lifetime Achievement Oscar. People couldn't understand why someone who had once poured everything into his craft would turn his back on the very thing that had defined him. Hackman's silence was the first warning that no one who had lived in the bright spotlight for 40 years could disappear so easily. What did that silence hide? A family secret? A shocking will? Or a personal pain that Hackman had never shared with anyone? Not even his first wife, Faye Maltz, or his 3 biological children. When the call from the Santa Fe police came late at night, reporting 2 bodies found in separate rooms and a mysteriously dead dog, all the suspicions that had been suppressed for 21 years suddenly erupted. Gene Hackman, the legend who once dominated the silver screen, was now just a name in a coroner's report. The silence before the storm turned out to be just the opening chapter of a much darker, longer, and more painful story. A chapter that his own daughter, Leslie Ann Hackman, could not hold back tears when she held the will in her hands. The dirt roads leading to the wealthy neighborhood on the outskirts of Santa Fe, New Mexico, where Gene Hackman and his wife lived in seclusion, always carried a strange, lonely atmosphere. The sun in this high desert didn't shine like in California, nor was it as cool as in the eastern U.S. Instead, it cast an old, tired light over everything, as if the sky itself were patiently waiting for something to fall apart. Gene Hackman's $1 million home sat quietly atop a hill. overlooking the rolling mountains, holding secrets that no one dared to touch. The neighbors surrounding the Hackman residence rarely saw the couple outside. They didn't attend weekend wine parties, never went to church, nor visited the bustling farmers' markets. Both Gene and Betsy, when they did appear, were nothing more than faint shadows, passing by and disappearing behind the high iron gate. It is said that around 6 a.m., when the sun still lingered behind the mountains, Betsy would quietly take the old dog out of the house. She moved slowly, her eyes darting around as if she feared someone might be watching. The heavy steps of the dog seemed to echo the tension that enveloped the house. Less than 15 minutes later, Betsy would return with the dog, gently closing the gate, as if afraid that the sound might wake the sleeping spirits within the walls of Gene Hackman's home. Since his heart began to betray him, Gene Hackman rarely left his house. The only person who stepped through the door besides the Hackman family was a middle-aged woman, the delivery woman, with a face marked by sorrow. She would always mumble a few words as she left. Once, she whispered to a neighbor next door, "They're hiding something. There's something big that no one knows." Betsy Arakawa had no close relationships with anyone other than Gene Hackman, as she was an intensely private person. But an elderly neighbor, living just behind Hackman's fence, confirmed that Betsy often made phone calls in the backyard. Her voice was so soft that outsiders couldn't catch the content, but occasionally, a few words slipped through the trees. "He's getting worse. No, we can't let anyone know. This house isn't safe." These calls, according to the neighbor, always ended with a quiet sigh of relief, as though Betsy were carrying the weight of the entire sky on her shoulders. Who was on the other end of the line, Betsy's relatives or someone who held the secrets of the Hackman family? No one knew. But over time, the frequency of these calls increased, and the lines of worry on Betsy's face deepened after each conversation. Gene Hackman's home, once praised by the media as an architectural masterpiece amidst the wilderness, was, to those who had entered, a place colder than any they had ever known. It wasn't the cold of the climate or the architecture. It was the coldness in the air, a nameless sorrow that hung heavy. The walls were adorned with countless frames, but strangely there were no pictures of Gene Hackman's 3 biological children. Instead, only pictures of Betsy and Hackman from their travels together. Hackman's children, once running around the backyard of his Los Angeles home, had completely vanished from his life. Gene Hackman never publicly disclosed his health condition, but according to neighbors, many believed Hackman had been battling numerous ailments, from heart disease to arthritis and spinal degeneration. However, the most terrifying affliction wasn't the medical diagnosis, it was the invisible obsession that haunted the aging legends of Hollywood. From Marlon Brando and Katharine Hepburn to Greta Garbo, all the greatest icons of the Golden Age shared one tragic fate: being forgotten while still alive. For Hackman, once a box office titan, who ensured his name was synonymous with success for 3 decades, seeing himself slowly fade into obscurity, remembered only as an old legacy, was perhaps the disease that most ravaged his soul. Betsy once confided to a neighbor during a rare conversation, "Gene doesn't watch his old films. He says they belong to a different life." That was how Hackman severed the last thread connecting him to Hollywood, to his glorious past. But the truth was, Every night as the house fell into silence, Betsy would see him standing by the bedroom window, gazing at the distant mountains, whispering something to himself. Those whispers behind the door weren't the wind or hallucinations. They were unfinished conversations between Gene Hackman and his former self, the man who once stood in the dazzling spotlight, believing that the glory would last forever. But when the door closed and the Hollywood lights dimmed, all that remained was Gene Hackman, an old man alone and lost in his $1,000,000 home. And beyond that door, beyond the cold iron fence, the world kept turning. No one remembering Gene Hackman except for the whispers, waiting to become reality. The $1,000,000 house in the New Mexico hills, which once held whispered secrets and mysterious midnight calls, is now a cold, deathly crime scene. Red and blue lights flashing from police cars reflect off the adobe walls, casting an eerie glow on the night sky. Local residents quietly stand behind wooden fences, trying to imagine what could be happening inside the home that had been silent for years. The police break down the door, not because they received a distress call or heard screams, but because the unusual silence had drawn them there. The drug dealer, a middle-aged woman with a tired face, was the first to smell something, an indescribable odor. Not quite death, not quite mold, but a strange combination of chemicals and decaying flesh. When the door opened, what greeted the investigators was not a chaotic murder scene, but an absolute silence. Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa, two decomposed bodies, lay in separate rooms, each positioned differently, but sharing the same fate. Gene Hackman was lying on his back on the bed, the blanket pulled up to his chest as if he had simply fallen asleep after a long, tiring day. His eyes were closed, his mouth slightly open, but there were no signs of struggle or pain, no bruises, no marks of any kind, just the absolute silence of a body that had ceased to breathe. Betsy Arakawa, just a few steps away in the room, was slumped beside the bed, her arm still gripping the landline phone, one of the few items left from when they moved in. The phone showed no signs of an incoming call. No one knew if Betsy had dialed anyone, but her eyes were wide open, pupils clouded, staring at the window where the last light of the evening still lingered. Had she tried to call someone? Surely she must have been the first to notice something was wrong in the house. The three dogs lived with Gene and Betsy when the police arrived. Two of them were still alive, huddled beside their owners' bodies, their eyes red from fear and exhaustion. But the oldest dog, the one Betsy would take for walks every morning, was dead in the hallway between the two bedrooms. There was no sign of external force, no blood, no violence. The dog seemed to have died as if it were simply asleep. Why did two survive while one did not? Was the gas in the house not potent enough to kill them all, or was there something else that happened before the gas spread? Was it just a random occurrence, or did someone make a deliberate decision to end only one four-legged life? The forensic team immediately checked the heating system, gas pipes, and appliances in the house. The results sent a chill down everyone's spine. No sign of carbon monoxide leaks, no gas stoves turned on, no electrical short circuits. The toxic gas that spread throughout the house didn't seem to originate from within the house itself. The quick analysis left the entire investigation team silent. There was hydrogen sulfide in the air, a deadly gas with the smell of rotten eggs, but very difficult to detect in low concentrations. The source was unclear. It didn't come from the plumbing or the drains. and it appeared to have been introduced into the house from an external source, or worse, from inside the house itself. Gene Hackman died without a single wound, with no signs of a struggle. Betsy Arakawa was the same, except for the fact that she died while trying to contact someone. Could their deaths have been staged to look like an accident? A natural gas leak? But if that's the case, why was there evidence of a type of gas that didn't belong in the house? Questions began to pile up, layer after layer, like the illusory walls surrounding the already secretive house. Did Gene die before or after Betsy? Who was the first to notice the toxic gas? Who did Betsy try to call in her final moments? And if this was a murder, who was patient and cold enough to kill an elderly couple in such a brutal manner? The irony is that all three of Gene Hackman's children, despite not being as close to their father as before, had always mentally prepared for the day their 94-year-old father would pass away. But no one expected that day to come in this way. Taking Gene's wife, who was over 30 years younger, and who should have been the one arranging his funeral. No one knew if they were living together or separated. No one knew what Gene and Betsy had said to each other in their last moments. Were Betsy's secretive calls related to an invisible gas, or was she also a victim of a long-planned conspiracy? As the white cloth was laid over the two bodies, the million-dollar house fell silent once again. But this time, the secrets were no longer kept. Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa's funeral was quiet, much like the final years of their lives. There were no paparazzi, no media, just their closest family. But beneath the surface of that silence was an undercurrent of unanswered questions and suspicious glances weaving through those considered family. No one was prepared for the shock of losing both Gene and Betsy at the same time, but that shock paled in comparison to the earthquake that erupted when Gene's personal lawyer announced that his will had been updated just a few months before they passed. A will that not only redistributed millions of dollars, but also revealed financial secrets, strange investment decisions, shady dealings, and most importantly, simmering conflicts among the Hackman family members. The lawyer carefully unsealed the envelope, his voice steady but trying to maintain control as he read through each clause. The estimated estate was valued at $80 million, encompassing stocks, real estate, cash, and several anonymous investment accounts. However, the distribution was a cold slap in the face. A large portion, nearly 40%, was left to Betsy Arakawa, Gene's wife, who was 30 years his junior. 20% was divided equally among Gene's 3 biological children from his first marriage. 10% was allocated to an arts education charity, something no one found surprising. The remaining 30% was transferred into a secret trust, with the condition that it wouldn't be distributed for 10 years after Gene's death, and the identity of the primary beneficiary was not to be revealed immediately. Who is the secret beneficiary? Why did Gene choose to distribute his wealth in such a way? The lawyer further explained that because Gene and Betsy died almost simultaneously, no one could determine the order of death. According to New Mexico inheritance law, when the order of death cannot be proven, assets are treated as if both individuals died at the same time. This meant that Betsy's portion of the inheritance would not be passed directly to her family, but would revert to Gene's estate. Gene's 3 biological children, who had initially received only 20%, now found themselves facing the potential redistribution of Betsy's assets. Assets from someone they had never truly considered their mother. Betsy became an invisible figure in her husband's will. At the funeral, they remained silent, but once the lawyer's office door closed, the long-suppressed family conflicts that had been simmering for decades exploded like a ticking time bomb. Leslie Hackman, Gene's eldest daughter, was the first to speak, her voice trembling, though it was unclear whether it was from sorrow or anger. "Betsy was never our mother. Don't make us play along with this charade," she said bitterly. David, the second son, scoffed. 40% of the estate left to a woman who never gave him children, while the 3 biological children barely get a quarter of it. From awkward family dinners to Betsy's attempts to bond with Gene's children, only to be met with indifference, all the memories came flooding back for Leslie and David. Betsy had always been the lucky woman to step into Gene's life when he was already wealthy and famous. But for Gene, Betsy had been the only one by his side when the Hollywood limelight faded. Did Gene trust Betsy completely? Or had he hidden his suspicions about his own death beneath that cold will? During the asset inventory process, a series of anonymous investment accounts were revealed. Gene Hackman, a man who had never publicly shown interest in cryptocurrency, owned a large number of shares in companies involved in artificial intelligence and biological data. In fact, just weeks before his death, Gene transferred a large sum, nearly $2 million, into an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. Why would a seasoned actor nearing the end of his life get involved in such mysterious financial transactions? After leaving the lawyer's office, Leslie sat silently in the car, tears streaming down her face. Not only because she had lost her father, but also because of the truth about his life. The father she had once idolized was now brutally exposed before her. He wasn't just a loving father, but also a man of calculations, with financial secrets, shady dealings, and hidden assets. All of this painted a completely different picture of Gene Hackman than the man who used to watch movies with his daughter every night. "Perhaps we never truly understood him," Leslie muttered. The multi-million-dollar inheritance, instead of being a bridge connecting the family, turned out to be a sharp knife that severed the fragile family ties. A vast fortune, but at the cost of a broken family. Gene Hackman was once a box office guarantee. He didn't possess the handsome charm of a leading man, nor was he a romantic figure oozing with sexual appeal like the masculine icons of his era. Hackman was the type of actor that Hollywood's golden age longed for. Powerful, gritty performances, as if he was swallowing each frame into his very being. He stood there, in the midst of the 80s in the glorious 7, like a king without a throne. From The French Connection to Mississippi Burning and Unforgiven, Hackman didn't just act. He became the embodiment of the classic, yet unyielding American man. In Gene Hackman, people saw the wrinkles of an era, the decay of the American dream, and the pain of those forgotten by the world. And then, he himself became one of them. In 2004, Gene Hackman announced his retirement quietly, without fanfare, and without a final blockbuster film to wave goodbye to Hollywood. He disappeared, stepping away from the screen, citing health reasons, but everyone knew that was only the tip of the iceberg. Hollywood had no more room for Gene Hackman. The grizzled old men, symbols of a serious film era where script and acting were paramount, had become relics of the past. The industry he had helped shape had now turned into a money-making machine, where young faces, superhero franchises, and CGI films devoured all the old values. No one called for Hackman anymore. The producers and directors who once begged for his autograph now quietly forget his name, like an old, outdated memory. Gene Hackman didn't retire. Hollywood had retired. After stepping away from the silver screen, Hackman and Betsy moved to New Mexico, a quiet place with no lavish parties or glittering red carpets. People wondered why a legend like Gene Hackman would choose this place to spend his final years. The answer is simple and heartbreaking. In Hollywood, no one needed him anymore. In New Mexico, no one knew who he was. The million-dollar villa in the heart of the desert, which should have been a paradise for retirement, turned into a windowless prison. Hackman and Betsy lived quietly, almost completely detached from the world. Interview invitations gradually became fewer and eventually disappeared. There were no award ceremonies, no titles, no Lifetime Achievement Awards, as if Hollywood and the media had collectively erased his image from the list of honored icons. Gene Hackman lived his final years as a ghost king, the king of Hollywood who once wore the crown, but was later rejected and forgotten by the very kingdom he helped build. The most bitter reality for Hackman was that his final great role would never be filmed. There was no script, no director, no lights, no cameras, only 4 walls, a few aging dogs, and a wife watching the daily. The decline of the man she loved. Hackman was never afraid of death. He once said, "If I die alone one day, I won't be surprised." That's the fate of those who live too long in the limelight. But his departure was not just a biological end. It was a sentence, a brutal finale handed down by Hollywood for those brave enough to age, to refuse to bow down, and to live true to their essence. Gene Hackman didn't die from old age or illness. He died because Hollywood had killed him long before he was ever loved by Hollywood. Hollywood adored him when he was useful, but that love was as cheap as a Monday matinee ticket. When Hackman no longer brought in profits, no longer earned Oscars or provided sensational interviews, that love evaporated, disappearing as if it had never existed. Hollywood's love for Hackman was the most toxic kind. It loved him while he was valuable and discarded him when he became a burden. Gene Hackman wasn't the only one. He was just one of many icons that once lit up the Hollywood sky, only to be abandoned by that very sky. Peter O'Toole, the legend from Lawrence of Arabia, passed away quietly, unnoticed. Burt Reynolds, from sex symbol to a poor old man. Mickey Rourke, a misfit trying to find his way back into the film industry after years of being considered past his prime. Gene Hackman carried the tragedy of an entire generation. Those who dared to act from the heart, lived outside the glamorous mold, and grew old in the most natural way. His passing is not just the sorrow of a family or the loss of cinema lovers, but also a sentence for Hollywood itself, an industry that once created great icons only to trample and discard them when they no longer turned a profit. Betsy once said in her final speech, "Gene always knew who he was. It was Hollywood that forgot." The verdict for Gene Hackman had been handed down long ago, but his passing is the final chapter. Hollywood didn't kill Gene Hackman in a day. It killed him piece by piece through neglect, turning its back on the cheapest love a former king could ever receive. Gene Hackman passed away on a gloomy afternoon, without fanfare, without trumpets. The news of his death was as quiet as the last years of his life spent in the New Mexico desert, where no one bothered to search for Gene Hackman's name on the Hollywood map. There was no national memorial, no crowds lining up outside his gate to place flowers or light candles. Just a few short news reports, a couple of shallow articles summarizing his career, and that was it. Gene Hackman was once a legend, but when the curtain fell, he was just another old name, dusty in the public's memory, buried beneath stacks of legal documents, tax returns, and his final will. People discovered fragments, untold stories. Hackman's will not only determined the fate of his multi-million-dollar estate, but also raised a series of significant questions about what he had kept hidden for decades. An unnamed portion of his assets, investments, and transactions carried out through foreign companies formed a financial maze that even his personal lawyer couldn't fully unravel. Why did a man who once declared his disdain for wealthy tax evaders get involved in such ambiguous dealings outside of the U.S.? Why, before his death, did he repeatedly request updates to his will, cutting off some relatives, adding strange names, and even leaving unexplained sums to an anonymous NGO? Gene Hackman passed away, leaving behind a web of mysteries that remain unsolved. Gene Hackman's death was initially reported as due to old age and complications from chronic heart disease. However, independent reports from several local newspapers in New Mexico began circulating a chilling theory: toxic gas inside Hackman's home. A small amount of carbon monoxide was found in his old mansion. The ventilation system, just sufficient enough, was believed to have caused fatigue-induced hallucinations, gradually weakening his health. What was striking, however, was that this system had been inspected just months before Hackman's sudden death, and at that time, there were no signs of any leaks. Was this simply an accident, or was someone intentionally turning the multi-million-dollar estate into a deadly trap? Could Hackman's financial secrets be connected to this mysterious death? Local authorities opened an investigation, but as Hollywood lost interest, everything fell into silence. Leslie cried in front of the media, not only because she had lost her father, but also due to the overwhelming sense of betrayal. She thought that after years of estrangement, Hackman and she had finally reconciled, but the cold, ruthless, and calculated final will told a different story. When a legend falls, it isn't just tears that fall, but also blood, betrayal, and wounds that never heal. If Hollywood were a house, Gene Hackman was the one who built every brick. But when he passed away, Hollywood didn't look back. No official memorial, no special film festivals to honor him. In fact, some of the younger people in the industry began asking each other, "Who is Gene Hackman?" And so Hollywood, where glory and oblivion are separated by just a breath, shifted their attention to younger, more marketable stars, leaving Hackman's legacy behind. Gene Hackman, once hailed as the unthroned king of Hollywood, ultimately passed away as a stranger on the very land he bled and shed tears to build. They no longer needed him, and his death was no more than a small notice lost amid a flurry of cheap entertainment news. But the tapes were never made. The public, Hackman's family, remained silent. The media gradually forgot, and Gene Hackman's secrets went with him to the grave, at least until someone finds the courage or cruelty to unearth them. One day, those recordings may leak, and when they do, the world will learn that Gene Hackman did not simply die from age or illness, but from the dark secrets that had shadowed him his entire life. But that day has yet to come. The curtain has fallen, and Gene Hackman, the betrayed king, is now nothing more than a ghost in Hollywood. Gene Hackman has gone, taking his rotting secrets to the grave, leaving behind not a gift, but a blood curse. A legacy where those who survive must pay with tears, suspicion, and an agony that never heals. We can only wonder, will the truth about Gene Hackman ever be revealed, or will it remain one of the unsolved mysteries forever? Share your thoughts about this story in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss out on exciting content. See you in the next video. Gene Hackman, a true Hollywood legend, captivated audiences with his remarkable performances, but also left people intrigued by the life and mysteries that lay beyond the limelight. When he passed away, his vast fortune and prestigious accolades were only a small part of the story. Beneath the Oscar statues and iconic films lay a tale of isolation, lost connections, and puzzling choices he left behind for his family to unravel. Hackman's story isn't just that of a star, but a deep dive into secrecy, loss, and hidden truths. What do you think about the mysteries Hackman left behind? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. As the investigation unfolded, the mysterious clues only fueled growing conspiracy theories. Strange vials of medicine were discovered, some used and others still sealed, prompting experts to wonder if Hackman had ever experimented with a secret drug or been part of a covert program. The notes and fingerprints on the documents only deepened the complexity of the case. Investigators have yet to reach a final conclusion, but every clue they uncover reveals a fragmented piece of a much larger secret, one that may have been buried underground for decades. Gene Hackman has passed away, leaving behind a mountain of money and Oscar statues. But what his family discovered were the shattered pieces of trust, love, and missed chances for reconciliation. The memories of him weren't just the photos on the walls, but the size of the pictures left behind. Faded scenes from the film Family Night's glory that once surrounded Hackman's life in a glittering halo. Yet, when the Hollywood lights dimmed, all that remained were the echoes of the past. A place where an old man continued to write letters to his children, knowing they would never be sent. Even in death, the only way Hackman could truly end his story was by vanishing from it. He wrote his own conclusion by leaving the world in an unexpected way. News of his passing broke on a gloomy morning, just before dawn, with no warning, much like his reclusive life over the last 2 decades. When the news broke in a local newspaper, it quickly caught the attention of both Hollywood media and Hackman's own family. Everything began to unravel as the family's long-hidden doors swung open after years of being tightly sealed. Hackman's family had never truly grasped the full extent of his wealth. While the image of a Hollywood legend with 2 Oscars, walking the most prestigious red carpets, implied great fortune, no one ever questioned the immense wealth Hackman had quietly amassed. However, the truth about his assets remained elusive. When a handwritten will from 2001 was discovered and notarized, the Hackman family believed everything was settled. The house in Santa Fe, a bank account in California, and the vintage Hudson Hornet Hackman had kept since his youth. The total value was estimated at around $5 million, a modest sum considering his illustrious career. But as they dug deeper, old documents surfaced, revealing a completely different story. Gene Hackman was not just a remarkable actor, but also a master at concealing his wealth in the financial world. Since the 1990s, after winning his second Oscar, Hackman quietly crafted a complex financial network involving stocks, real estate, anonymous investment funds, and discreet overseas transfers. These secret transactions were never directly tied to Hackman, but after tracing the series of deals, every penny ultimately led back to a single account he had set up in 1993. The total value of his assets, piecing together all the clues, was estimated to surpass $80 million. This staggering figure left even his closest friends in utter shock. What truly shocked Hackman's family wasn't just the amount of money, but the elaborate ways he had concealed it over the years. He used aliases, trust accounts in Switzerland, the Cayman Islands, and Singapore. The biggest question that remained was why he kept this fortune hidden from his own family. Was it a matter of mistrust, or were there darker, undisclosed secrets at play? A theory began to circulate within the Hackman family. He had lived emotionally and financially distant, as if fearing that revealing his wealth would pull him into endless disputes. To protect himself, he constructed financial walls so impenetrable that even his own children couldn't access them. This case appears to be more than a routine investigation into an accident. Reports of strange visitors at night and workers vanishing during the mansion's construction have only heightened the public's intrigue. How could these people vanish without a trace? Could they be linked to the underground tunnel? Are these disappearances the key to unlocking the hidden truths? The FBI has kept details sealed, fueling rumors about an underground network, buried treasures, or even a grand conspiracy tied to Hackman's life. Each unanswered question only intensifies the mystery, drawing people in and sparking a relentless desire to uncover what lies beneath. As rumors about Gene Hackman's health swirled through Hollywood, an investigation began to uncover the final pieces of his life. Some speculated that Hackman had secretly written a will years ago, splitting his fortune into multiple accounts to prevent disputes over his assets. Others believed he had set up an anonymous charity, channeling much of his wealth into it as a quiet way to atone for abandoning his children. The less Hackman appeared, the more he became the focus of endless conspiracy theories and made-up tales. Yet, in his modest home in Santa Fe, he quietly spent his final days, leaving behind not just a legendary career, but also lingering mysteries. What are your thoughts on the mysteries surrounding Hackman's life? Drop your comments below. On long evenings, Gene Hackman would often sit alone in the living room, his gaze fixed on old family tapes. He wrote a letter to Elizabeth, his youngest daughter, on her 30th birthday, but it never left the drawer. Hackman confessed that, throughout his life, he believed he was protecting her by keeping his distance, wanting her to live free from the shadow of his fame. But now, he wondered if he had only been protecting himself, hiding from those he loved. Each letter Hackman wrote was a glimpse into his soul, revealing parts of himself his family had never seen. Hackman wasn't just a Hollywood legend, he was a lonely man, torn between his desire to protect his family and the fear of losing himself in the role of father. The more the Hackman family sifted through old drawers, the more unexpected pieces of the puzzle they uncovered. Mysterious financial deals, unexplained transfers, and most shockingly, a list of beneficiaries that made no sense. Hackman had crafted a secret inheritance list that excluded every member of his family. No one could answer, but shock and outrage filled the room as the Hackman family uncovered the truth. An emotional storm erupted, with Christopher, the eldest son, the first to express his anger. He condemned his father for living a life of pretense, and even in death, continuing to play a role within his own family. Instead, millions of dollars were transferred to strangers. Like a childhood friend in California, a retired assistant from the 80s, and even a server at his favorite restaurant. Why had Hackman chosen these people, and why had his family been left out? With a broken heart, Elizabeth held the letters to her chest, as if they were the last remnants of the father she had always idolized. The childhood memories of Hackman sitting by the window on Sunday mornings, reading the newspaper, were now shattered by the harsh truth. Betsy Arakawa, Hackman's second wife, sat silently in the corner of the room. After all those years together, she realized she had never truly understood the man she had called her husband. His disappearances, his unannounced trips, now all made sense, becoming parts of a larger picture of a man who had lived in solitude. The emotional earthquake didn't end there, as the family lawyer uncovered secret accounts. Over $20 million had been transferred by Hackman to an anonymous charity, the GH Legacy Fund. The true purpose of this fund remained a mystery, but one thing was clear. Hackman had chosen to trust strangers over his own family. As the lawyers began reading the will, each word seemed to hang in the air, suspended in the silent room. Over $80 million in assets were listed: stocks, real estate in California and New Mexico, an art collection, and vintage cars. However, Hackman had set strict inheritance conditions. No one in the family was allowed to exploit the Hackman name for memoirs, documentaries, or to sell his story. No one was allowed to publicly dispute the estate in the media. There was also a secret fund, called the Pristine Fund, and anyone in the family who accessed it would immediately forfeit their inheritance. This revealed that Hackman had crafted a life of absolute control, even in death. Everything, from his film career to his personal story, remained firmly under his command. One of the unfinished scripts Hackman never sent began with the line, "If there is an afterlife, I want to be born without anyone knowing who I am." It was a disguised autobiography, recounting his life from the dark corners he had never shared. Hackman's handwritten notes, sometimes shaky in their execution, revealed a man torn between his desire for success and the betrayal he felt from within himself. Amidst the vague financial documents, Hackman also left behind a secret investment fund worth millions, transferred into private funds starting in the late 90s. In the transaction records, one name stood out: Frankie the Fox Catalano, a notorious Hollywood mafia boss. Hackman, known for his propriety, had maintained a relationship with this gangster for decades. His past, filled with unexplained debts and shady dealings, now became an inseparable part of the legacy he left behind. These connections, long buried in secrecy, raised more questions than answers, casting a dark shadow over the life of the man once revered as a Hollywood legend. Hackman and Betsy Arakawa lived a peaceful life away from Hollywood, but no one knew that behind those quiet walls was a man who controlled everything. Betsy once said, "Gene was the perfect husband as long as I didn't touch what he called his personal legacy." That legacy wasn't just his film career, it was the control over his own story. Christopher, the eldest son, felt the weight of Hackman's shadow with every step he took. When the will was revealed, he nearly laughed. "He won even in death," he said. "He controls everything, even our thoughts." Despite Hackman's family hiring financial experts and private investigators to trace his mysterious funds, all efforts led to dead ends. Every time they made progress, it seemed Hackman was always a decade ahead of them. When the family's attorney released the official estate report, most of what was recorded was just the tip of the iceberg: the house in Santa Fe, the vintage car, and a few bank accounts. The rest of his true assets remained concealed somewhere in the shadows of the financial world, known only to Hackman, and with his passing, those secrets went with him. This vast fortune, instead of becoming a family legacy, had turned into the ruins of a man who chose to give up everything to maintain absolute control. As the Hackman family stood before the old house, where time seemed to have stopped, they realized they had never truly belonged in his life. A legendary man, living in isolation, holding on to his wealth as part of his soul, now taking those secrets to the grave. His legacy had become an unsolvable puzzle for those who were closest to him. Leave number 1 if you feel touched by this story. Elizabeth, the youngest daughter, had always hoped her father would leave her some freedom, but those hopes were shattered by the cold terms in the will. Not a single line offered emotion or a personal message from Hackman, only conditions and threats of disinheritance. His vast fortune became a burden, pulling the family into the depths of unmet expectations. Hackman sat coldly, watching his children struggle through disputes and rumors surrounding the untouched fund. Speculations about off-the-books investments and the anonymous charity spread, ensnaring the Hackman family in a relentless obsession with the secrets he left behind. When both Hackman and Betsy passed away, the things he had kept hidden from his family became a heavy burden. The entire family was torn, unsure whether to protect his legacy or uncover the secrets he left behind. The bitter truth emerged. Hackman's greatest legacy wasn't his wealth or fame, but a broken family, forever overshadowed by the immense legacy of a Hollywood legend. In the long-locked study, the family discovered unfinished scripts and Hackman's personal journals. The pages revealed untold stories, memories of a life he had tried to keep hidden, from his time as a Marine to his rise as an Oscar-winning star. His $4 million mansion, once a symbol of success and power, has now become the focal point of a mysterious investigation. The FBI's unexpected raid uncovered a hidden underground tunnel thrusting Gene Hackman, one of Hollywood's greatest stars with a tumultuous life, into the heart of an unprecedented case. The dark secrets hidden beneath this mansion not only conceal Hackman's past, but also set investigators on a trail of events that raise a chilling question. Was the death of him and his wife just a tragic accident? Or is there a sinister conspiracy at play? The investigators uncovered evidence that sent chills down their spines. Old photographs, secret documents, and bizarre, unexplainable symbols surfaced during the search. Among the most chilling discoveries was an old, dust-covered phone with unread messages and a crumpled calendar filled with cryptic notes. This only fueled suspicions that Hackman may have been tied to an underground network. Behind those photos are untold stories, mysterious figures, and encounters the public has never known. Each find deepens the mystery surrounding his life and death, raising more questions than answers. Gene Hackman's life is not just the story of a Hollywood legend, but also a lesson in loneliness, untold secrets, and decisions that even his family must now reflect upon. Although he has passed, his legacy and the unanswered questions continue to linger in the hearts of both the public and his loved ones. Hackman lived a complex life, and the mysteries he left behind will forever be part of a story that no one can fully unravel. His story invites us to reflect on fame, control, and the things we may never fully understand. What are your thoughts on Hackman's life and legacy? When the FBI raided his abandoned estate following his sudden death, they uncovered something unimaginable beneath the floorboards. A hidden tunnel that could hold a far darker secret than anyone anticipated. What did they discover down there? And what truths had Hackman been concealing? Gene Hackman, a Hollywood icon celebrated for his unforgettable roles in Unforgiven and The French Connection, led a life brimming with fame, fortune, and widespread respect. Yet, behind the luxury of his secluded Santa Fe mansion, a chilling and mysterious story was quietly unfolding. Before we dive further into this mystery, make sure to like the video if you find the story captivating, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss an update on unsolved mysteries. Don't forget to share this video with friends and family so we can unravel these shocking truths about one of Hollywood's greatest stars together. Who was the first to uncover the truth? A maintenance worker was hired to check the house after no one answered the phone for several days. When he entered the estate, he found that the world of Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa had fallen into eternal silence. Betsy Arakawa was discovered to have contracted the H virus, a dangerous infection spread through the feces or urine of rodents. But the strange part was that there were no signs of mice or rodents in the house. Hackman was not infected by the virus. If there was a source of contamination in the house, why was Arakawa the only one affected? Some theories suggest she might have contracted the disease during a recent trip, but credit card records show she hadn't left Santa Fe for months before her death. Could someone have brought the virus into the house? But why? These questions remain unanswered, and the appearance of the H virus only deepens the mystery surrounding Betsy Arakawa's death. Gene Hackman is one of Hollywood's greatest actors, with a career spanning over 40 years and iconic films like Unforgiven, The French Connection, Superman, and The Royal Tenenbaums. However, after retiring, he virtually disappeared from the spotlight. He stopped attending award ceremonies, avoided events, and severed ties with most of his old friends. The truth is that Hackman's story serves as a reminder of life's fragility. No matter how brightly you shine, in the end, the most important thing is having someone by your side when the spotlight fades. For Gene Hackman, that light dimmed in an empty house, but his legacy will live on forever. The story of Gene Hackman and the secrets hidden beneath his mansion is bound to make you reflect. These strange discoveries not only reveal the darker corners of a Hollywood legend's life, but also raise unresolved questions full of mystery. What do you think about these secrets? Could they change the way we view Hackman and his private life? Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa were once one of Hollywood's most iconic couples, with friends in high places and fans who followed their every move. But when they disappeared within their own home, no one noticed anything unusual. Why? Because they lived very privately. After Hackman retired in 2004, he completely withdrew from Hollywood, even turning down rare interview requests. He and Arakawa embraced a peaceful, quiet life with no social media, and family and friends rarely reached out. Those close to them said Hackman became more withdrawn, even from his closest circle. Neighbors didn't suspect anything. Hackman's estate was tucked away in a secluded part of Santa Fe, and his lack of outings was not unusual, as he had maintained this reclusive lifestyle for many years. The life of a man who once stood at the pinnacle of glory has now become that of an empty mansion and years of solitude in his final days. When Hackman passed away, there were no loved ones by his side, no grand memorial, no heartfelt eulogies from colleagues, just a silent house, an unsolved mystery, and a cinematic legacy that will endure forever. People will remember Gene Hackman as one of the greatest actors of all time, with 2 Oscars and dozens of classic films, or as a man who spent his final years in isolation, leaving the world without anyone truly knowing. As one group of officers checked on Gene Hackman, the other entered the master bedroom. The bathroom door was slightly ajar, the dim light still on, and then they saw her. Betsy Arakawa lay motionless on the bathroom floor in her nightgown, her legs curled up as if she had endured intense pain. A broken pill bottle lay on the floor, white pills scattered everywhere. Her hand loosely gripped a towel, and on the vanity was an open notebook with scribbled unfinished notes. A chilling question lingered. Did she fall, or did she choose this end? There were no signs of struggle, no evidence of violence, but what had truly happened in that room? The officers stood in disbelief. 2 people who had once been inseparable were now divided by a week of silence and darkness. That morning, a maintenance worker was conducting routine checks when he noticed the front door of the mansion wide open. A strange sight for a house that was usually meticulously maintained. After knocking several times with no response, he decided to enter. What he found inside changed everything. Gene Hackman was discovered motionless at the entrance, while Betsy Arakawa's body was found in the bathroom. Both had been dead for several days, with clear signs of decomposition, suggesting they had been there for a long time without anyone realizing. But the oddities didn't end with their deaths. When investigators conducted their initial check, they found no signs of forced entry. The door was intact, there were no signs of tampering, and everything in the house appeared undisturbed. At first, the case seemed like a natural tragedy, an elderly couple passing away quietly. But as the investigation progressed, strange details began to surface, casting doubt on the initial assumptions. What had seemed like a simple accident now appeared to be the beginning of a much more complex and mysterious story, one filled with twists that even the investigators couldn't have predicted. A scene of isolation and decay. Gene Hackman's mansion had always been quiet, but today that silence felt unnervingly heavy. Tom Reyes, a local maintenance worker, was sent to inspect the nearby drainage system after residents reported a strange smell in the air. The odor wasn't overwhelming, but there was something distinctly off about it. A subtle but unsettling presence that made the air feel wrong. When they looked around, a strange detail caught their attention. Hackman's 3 dogs were still alive, but one small dog lay dead in the corner of the kitchen, lifeless. The other 2 dogs, thin and scared, ran to hide behind the officers, as if they knew something terrible had happened. The coroner arrived quickly, but the police had a suspicion. Gene Hackman had likely passed away first, leaving Betsy alone in the silent house, and then she too had quietly passed. But what surprised them most wasn't what they found in the living room or bedroom, but in the basement. When an officer descended the stairs to investigate, the beam of his flashlight illuminated an old wooden door at the end of the hallway. This door wasn't in the house's blueprints, and when they opened it, a secret tunnel appeared before them. What lay inside took their breath away. On February 11th, Betsy Arakawa left the house to do her usual shopping. Store security cameras captured her picking up a few items, stopping at a CBS pharmacy, and even buying toys for their 3 dogs. No one could have predicted that it would be the last time they saw her. When the FBI later reviewed the security footage from the house, they saw her return, open the door as usual, and then vanish inside, never to be seen again. Hackman, with his declining Alzheimer's, likely couldn't comprehend what was happening. He didn't call for help, didn't leave the house, simply sat there in his shrinking world, waiting for his wife to wake him up the next morning. But that morning never came. Investigators believe Hackman likely didn't comprehend that his wife had passed. Late-stage Alzheimer's may have clouded his grasp on reality, and in his mind, Betsy could still have been alive. He may have waited for her for days, not eating or drinking, sitting motionless, caught between reality and the illusions of his fading memories. When the FBI checked the refrigerator, they found the food untouched. Hackman couldn't care for himself. He had forgotten how to turn on the stove or even how to get water in the days following Betsy's death. He likely sat there, waiting, as time slowly wore him down, but he didn't seem to think much of it. He lived reclusively, with one neighbor remarking, "We just thought he wanted privacy." No one realized that inside that house, an elderly man sat helpless, unable to face reality. Perhaps if someone had noticed him sooner, things could have been different. But in a world where everyone is wrapped up in their own lives, Hackman and Betsy's story became a silent tragedy, unfolding behind closed doors. When the police gathered their personal belongings, one small detail sent a chill down the investigators' spines. A worn notebook filled with Hackman's writing, but not scripts or film notes. Instead, it was a list of basic tasks Betsy had written for him. How to turn on the lights, how to get water, when to take his medicine. The list revealed a heartbreaking truth. Despite being a Hollywood legend, Hackman had become entirely dependent on his wife for survival. And when she was gone, his world crumbled with her. If anyone had asked Hackman what the most important thing in his life was, he likely wouldn't mention his Oscars or fame. He would speak of Betsy, the one who saw both his brilliance and his decline. Without her, Hackman couldn't continue. Their story didn't end with a goodbye, but with silence. An old man sitting in an empty house, lost in memories of the past. No applause, no flashing lights, just a Hollywood tragedy that no one could have foreseen. When the FBI investigated the house, they noticed something unusual. A small, locked door in the basement that seemed to have been overlooked. When they opened it, a secret tunnel was revealed. No one knew where it led or why it was there, but one thing was clear. Gene Hackman's secrets didn't end with his death. When investigators entered the house after nearly 2 weeks of silence, they were confronted with a scene that left them speechless. Hackman was still sitting in his favorite chair, sunglasses on, cane beside him, silent as though waiting for Betsy to come in with a hot cup of tea. But the house was unnervingly still. No music, no television, no signs of life. When they entered the bedroom, the reason became clear. Betsy Arakawa lay on the bed in a haunting scene. Pills were scattered across the floor, and an open notebook revealed scribbled words, unfinished sentences, a chilling testament to the final moments. A love story turned tragic. For over 30 years, Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa were the definition of a devoted, inseparable couple. Betsy wasn't just his partner. She was his steadfast companion as Hackman's mind began to deteriorate from Alzheimer's. For a man once known for his sharp intellect, the disease felt like a cruel betrayal. Scripts he had memorized became unreadable, and characters he once embodied faded from his memory. Through it all, Betsy was his anchor. She knew when he needed his medication, when he required help with the stairs, and when he was lost in the fog of his own past. Every day, she read him articles about cinema, reconnecting him with the moments of glory he might have forgotten. But one day, that routine came to an abrupt halt. If you want to stay updated on more intriguing stories and the latest events, make sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell for our newest videos. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think about these theories? We can't wait to hear your feedback and dive into more captivating stories together. The police found no signs of a power outage, meaning the air conditioning system was still functioning normally. Someone had intentionally turned it off. But who and why? What chilled the investigative team was the absence of any signs of everyday life. There were no new emails or messages on Hackman's phone, no visitors to the villa for weeks, and no grocery bills or food deliveries for over a month. The villa appeared to have been abandoned by Hackman, or perhaps he no longer had the ability to maintain a normal life. As the police continued to search through Gene Hackman's mansion, a heavy and strange atmosphere filled the entire house. What they saw didn't resemble the home of a Hollywood legend. It looked more like a place abandoned for weeks. There were no signs of life except for two exhausted dogs. The kitchen was filled with rotting food, some left untouched, and there was no indication that Hackman had eaten for several days before his death. This raised a major question. Had he completely exhausted himself before passing away? The forensic report revealed that Hackman hadn't eaten in a long time with no food in his stomach. This indicated that, without Arakawa by his side, he couldn't care for himself in his final days. Hackman may have been completely disoriented due to his advanced Alzheimer's disease, unable to remember how to call for help, prepare meals, or understand his surroundings. As the days passed, the mansion slowly turned into a deadly trap, with Hackman unable to escape the isolation that surrounded him. Another suspicious discovery was that the house's air conditioning system was completely turned off. During the hot summer months in Santa Fe, temperatures inside the house could exceed 35 degrees Celsius, 95 degrees Celsius. Without ventilation, the air became thick and oxygen-deprived. This stifling atmosphere might have contributed to Hackman falling into a coma before he passed away. But why was the air conditioning turned off? Did Hackman forget to turn it on? Did Arakawa turn it off before leaving? Or was there another unexplained reason behind it? However, the greatest mystery lay in the basement. When one of the officers discovered an old wooden door that wasn't in the original blueprints of the house, it raised an immediate question. Why was it there? When they opened the door, a spiral staircase descended into the darkness. A strange smell rose from below, sending chills down the investigators' spines. As they shone their flashlights down, a hidden tunnel appeared. What lay inside left them utterly stunned. When the forensic experts examined Betsy Arakawa's body more closely, they uncovered a shocking detail. She had contracted a dangerous virus capable of causing severe respiratory failure and internal organ damage. This virus is typically transmitted through contact with the feces, urine, or saliva of infected rodents, or by inhaling airborne particles from rodent feces, or through contaminated food and drink. What was terrifying about this virus is that it can develop in the human body without clear symptoms for several days, meaning Betsy could have been infected earlier, with the disease only truly manifesting on the final day. The symptoms include sudden high fever, severe difficulty breathing, muscle pain, prolonged fatigue, and rapid respiratory failure. When the forensic investigators examined the living conditions in the house, they found numerous signs of rodents, which could have been the source of Arakawa's infection. But the biggest unanswered question remained. When did she contract the disease? And more importantly, was this the primary cause of her death? As the FBI and investigative team continued their search of the house, they noticed something unusual. The basement seemed to be missing from the original blueprints. A police officer discovered an old wooden door in the basement, one that wasn't listed in any of the house's building documents. When they opened it, a dark tunnel appeared before them. The atmosphere immediately thickened with tension. What awaited them inside? Flashlights in hand, they took slow, cautious steps down the stairs, and when the light finally reached the far wall of the tunnel, they froze. Not only were Hackman and Arakawa affected, but all three of their dogs were also impacted. One dog had died before the police arrived, with the cause still unclear. The other two dogs survived, but their health had greatly deteriorated, showing signs of dehydration and malnutrition. Veterinarians concluded that all three dogs exhibited signs of respiratory infection, likely caused by a virus spread through the air inside the house. But how could a luxurious and well-maintained mansion like this become the breeding ground for such a dangerous virus? When forensic investigators began examining the bodies of Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa, the initial theories about their deaths were quickly thrown into question. The police had initially suspected that Hackman may have passed away due to old age and the late stages of Alzheimer's disease. But what about Arakawa? She had died first, suddenly, with no signs of struggle, no indications of external force. Just a frail body and a spilled bottle of pills on the floor. But when the forensic results came back, everything became even more terrifying. The initial conclusion was that Gene Hackman died from a heart attack. His Alzheimer's had taken a toll on his body, and his cardiovascular condition had deteriorated over time. With no one there to care for him, he quietly passed away, showing no signs of external force. Hackman likely died in his chair in the mudroom, possibly from exhaustion or a sudden heart attack. But the most unsettling part wasn't just that Hackman had passed away. It was the profound loneliness he must have experienced in his final days. Hackman's close friends, who once called him weakly, began to notice the unusual silence, unanswered messages, calls that went unreturned. At first, they assumed he might be traveling. A longtime friend of Hackman recalled, Gene and Betsy often enjoyed long trips, but soon they realized no one knew where they had gone. No one could get in touch with them. Even old Hollywood friends began to grow concerned. Hackman wasn't a social person, but he wasn't the type to vanish without a trace. One of his friends decided to call Hackman's neighbor in Santa Fe. The response only deepened their suspicions. "I haven't seen them in a while," the neighbor said, "but I didn't think much of it. Gene is getting old, maybe he just wanted some peace and quiet." No one suspected anything was wrong, and no one realized that a tragedy was quietly unfolding within that house. The living room was undisturbed, the sofa neatly arranged, a cup of water still sitting untouched on the table. But when they entered the bedroom, the atmosphere shifted. Hackman sat motionless in his old armchair, sunglasses still on, his thin hand resting on the armrest, as if waiting for someone to wake him. In the bed lay Betsy Arakawa, pills scattered across the floor. But it wasn't the bedroom that truly unsettled the officers. It was when they checked the basement. They discovered a hidden door, one no one had noticed before. When they opened it, a secret tunnel emerged before them. Standing there in stunned silence, they were unprepared for what they would find inside. On the first day, Hackman's mansion appeared as it always did, with no signs of anything amiss. By the second day, the grass had grown long, a clear indication that no one was maintaining it. On the third day, a few packages were left at the doorstep, but they remained uncollected. On the fourth day, something strange happened. Their two dogs began barking incessantly. On the fifth day, a delivery person arrived and noticed that the house was eerily silent. No lights, no sounds, no signs of life. On the sixth day, a few neighbors started to take notice, but no one found the situation alarming. Then the seventh day passed, and Hackman's mansion remained completely still. A longtime friend of Hackman, growing increasingly concerned, decided to request a welfare check from the police. "We've called him several times but received no response," they said. The unnoticed absence. Gene Hackman's mansion in Santa Fe had always exuded a sense of formality before the pandemic. Hackman and his wife had grown even more reclusive, no longer hosting gatherings, taking walks down the street, or interacting with neighbors. In fact, the few who had once seen him started to forget the last time they did. For a Hollywood legend, someone who once captivated audiences on the silver screen, his gradual disappearance from everyday life wasn't surprising. Hackman had long avoided the spotlight and had no intention of returning. Yet no one could have predicted how eerily prolonged this absence would become. The local police received the request to check on Hackman and Betsy. However, with no immediate signs of anything unusual, they didn't consider it urgent. When an officer checked the exterior of the mansion, the front door was closed with no signs of forced entry. Inside, there was no sound, no TV, no music, just an eerie silence. The officer knocked on the door, but no one answered, so they left, assuming Hackman and Betsy simply didn't want to be disturbed. But the truth was, they were too late. When the police returned to Hackman's mansion, what they discovered left them stunned. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your opinions. Don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next video, where we'll continue to explore mysterious stories and shocking discoveries. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. And don't forget to share this video with your friends so we can explore these mysterious things together that we never thought possible. Gene Hackman, a Hollywood legend known for his roles in Unforgiven and The French Connection, lived a life full of glory, wealth, and admiration. But behind the grandeur of the secluded mansion in Santa Fe, a dark and eerie mystery was quietly unfolding. When the FBI investigated his abandoned house after his sudden death, they uncovered a secret beneath the floorboards that no one could have imagined. A hidden tunnel that could reveal a darker story than anyone had ever imagined. What did they find there? And what secrets had Hackman been hiding? Before we dive deeper into uncovering this secret, don't forget to like the video if you find the story intriguing, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any videos on unsolved mysteries. Be sure to share this video with your friends and family so we can explore these shocking truths about one of Hollywood's biggest stars together. A love story turned tragic. For over 3 decades, Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa were the epitome of an inseparable, devoted couple. She wasn't just his life partner, but also his dedicated companion during the final years of his life, as Hackman slowly fell into the darkness of Alzheimer's disease. For a man with a sharp mind like Hackman, the disease was nothing short of a curse. Scripts he once had memorized turned into blank pages. Characters who were once a part of him began to fade from memory, and the only person helping him hold on to the fragments of his life was Betsy. She knew when he needed his medication, when he needed assistance going down the stairs, and when he was simply lost in his past memories. Every day she would read him articles about cinema, reminding him of the glorious moments Hackman may have forgotten. But one day, that routine suddenly stopped. On February 11th, Betsy Arakawa left the house to go shopping as usual. The store's security cameras captured footage of her picking out items, stopping at a CVS pharmacy, and even buying some toys for their 3 dogs. No one thought it would be the last time they saw her. When the FBI later reviewed the security footage at the house, they saw her return, open the door as usual, and then disappear inside, never to be seen again. Hackman, with his worsening Alzheimer's, likely didn't understand what was happening. He didn't call for help, didn't leave the house, just sat there in an increasingly shrinking world, waiting for his wife to wake him up the next morning. But that morning never came. When investigators entered the house after nearly 2 weeks with no signs of activity, they were met with a scene that left them speechless. Hackman was still sitting there in his favorite chair, sunglasses still on, cane beside him, silent as if he were waiting for Betsy to appear from the kitchen with a hot cup of tea. But the house was eerily silent, with no music, no television, no signs of daily life. And when they entered the bedroom, they realized why. Betsy Arakawa was lying there on the bed in a chilling scene. Pills were scattered on the floor, a notebook open with scribbled words, unfinished sentences. Investigators believe that Hackman likely didn't understand that his wife had passed away. Late-stage Alzheimer's may have caused him to not recognize reality. Perhaps in Hackman's mind, Betsy was still alive. He may have waited for her for an entire week, not eating or drinking, just sitting there, lost between reality and the illusions of his memories. When the FBI checked the refrigerator, they found that food was still untouched. Hackman couldn't care for himself. He had forgotten how to turn on the stove, or even how to get water in the days after Betsy's death. He likely just sat there, waiting, as time wore him down day by day. But he didn't think much about it. He lived quite reclusively, with one neighbor saying, "We just thought he wanted privacy." No one realized that inside that house, an elderly man sat there, completely helpless, unsure how to face reality. Perhaps if someone had discovered him earlier, things might have been different. But in a world where everyone is too busy with their own lives, Hackman and Betsy's story became a silent tragedy unfolding behind closed doors. When the police collected their personal belongings, one small detail sent a chill down the investigators' spines. A worn notebook filled with Hackman's writing, but not scripts or notes about films, rather a list of basic tasks Betsy had written for him. How to turn on the lights, how to get water, when to take his medicine. A list that showed, despite being a silver screen legend, Hackman had become completely dependent on his wife to survive. And when she was gone, his world collapsed with her. If anyone had asked Hackman what the most important thing in his life was, he likely wouldn't mention his Oscars or fame. He would talk about Betsy, the one who witnessed both sides of his life, the brilliance and the decline. And without her, Hackman couldn't go on. Their story didn't end with a goodbye, but with silence, in an empty house, with an old man sitting there, lost in memories of days gone by. No applause, no flashing lights, just a Hollywood tragedy that no one could have predicted. When the FBI investigated the house, they noticed something strange. There was a small door in the basement, locked tight. A door that seemed to have been overlooked by everyone. And when they opened it, a secret tunnel appeared. No one knew where it led, no one knew why it was there. But one thing was certain, Gene Hackman's secrets didn't end there. If you want to follow more interesting stories and stay updated on the latest events, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell to get the latest videos from us. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think about these theories? We look forward to hearing your feedback so we can discuss and explore more fascinating stories together. The unnoticed absence. Gene Hackman's mansion in Santa Fe had always carried an air of formality before the pandemic. Hackman and his wife had become more reclusive than ever. No more gatherings with friends, no more long walks down the street, and even the few neighbors who had once seen Hackman began to forget when the last time they saw him was. For a Hollywood legend, someone who once captivated audiences on the silver screen, his disappearance from everyday life wasn't shocking. Hackman wasn't a fan of attention. He had long stepped away from the spotlight and had no desire to return. However, no one imagined that this absence would stretch on in such an eerie way. Hackman's close friends, who used to call him every week, began to notice the unusual silence. Unanswered messages, calls that went unanswered. At first, they thought they might be traveling. A longtime friend of Hackman recalled, "Gene and Betsy often enjoyed long trips. But then he realized that none of us knew where they had gone. No one could get in touch with them." Old friends from Hollywood also started to grow concerned. Hackman wasn't a social person, but he wasn't the type to disappear completely without leaving a trace. One of his friends decided to call Hackman's neighbor in Santa Fe. The response they received only deepened their suspicions. "I haven't seen them in a while," the neighbor said, "but I didn't think much of it. Gene is getting old. Maybe he just wanted some peace and quiet." No one suspected anything, and no one realized that a tragedy was unfolding within that house. On the first day, Hackman's mansion was just like any other day, with no signs of anything unusual. By the second day, the grass began to grow long, a clear sign that no one was taking care of it. On the third day, a few packages were left at the doorstep but went uncollected. On the fourth day, something strange began to happen. Their two dogs started barking incessantly. On the fifth day, a delivery person arrived and noted that the house was completely silent, everything frozen, with no lights, no sounds, no signs of life. On the sixth day, a few neighbors started to notice, but no one thought the situation was alarming. Then, the seventh day passed, and Gene Hackman's mansion remained completely quiet. A longtime friend of Hackman, feeling concerned about the strange absence, decided to request a welfare check from the police. "We've called him several times but received no response," they said. The local police received a request to check on Hackman and Betsy. However, with no signs of anything unusual, they did not consider it an urgent situation. When an officer checked the exterior of the mansion, they found the front door closed with no signs of forced entry. Inside, there were no sounds, no TV, no music, only an eerie silence. The officer knocked on the door, but no one answered, and they left, assuming that Hackman and Betsy simply did not want to be disturbed. But the truth was, they were too late. The police arrived at Hackman's mansion, and what they found left them stunned. The living room was undisturbed, the sofa neatly arranged, a cup of water still intact on the table, but when they entered the bedroom, the atmosphere grew cold. Hackman was still sitting there in his old armchair, his sunglasses still on, his thin hand resting on the armrest. He looked as if he were waiting for someone to wake him. And in the bedroom, Betsy Arakawa lay on the bed, pills scattered on the floor. But what really unsettled the officers wasn't the bedroom. It was when they checked the basement. they discovered a hidden door, one that no one had ever noticed before. And when they opened it, a secret tunnel appeared before them. They stood there, speechless, unable to prepare for what they were about to see inside. A scene of isolation and decay. Gene Hackman's mansion was always quiet, but today, that silence carried an eerie feeling. Tom Reyes, a local maintenance worker, was tasked with inspecting the nearby drainage system after residents reported a strange smell in the air. The smell wasn't overpowering, but there was something distinctly wrong about it. That morning, a maintenance worker was conducting routine checks when he noticed the front door of the house wide open, a strange sight for a mansion that was always meticulously maintained. After knocking several times without receiving a response, he decided to enter. What he found inside completely changed everything. Gene Hackman was discovered motionless at the entrance, while Betsy Arakawa's body was found in the bathroom. Both had been dead for several days, with clear signs of decomposition, indicating that they had been there for a long time without anyone knowing. However, the oddities didn't end with their deaths. When investigators conducted their initial check, they found no signs of forced entry. The door was intact, there were no signs of tampering, and everything in the house seemed undisturbed. At first, the case appeared to be a natural tragedy, an elderly couple passing away peacefully. However, as the investigation expanded, strange details began to emerge, making everything more ambiguous and suspicious. What seemed like a simple accident was actually hiding a complex story, filled with mysteries that even the investigators couldn't have anticipated. As one group of officers checked on Gene Hackman, the other entered the master bedroom. The bathroom door was slightly ajar, the dim light still on, and then they saw her. Betsy Arakawa lay motionless on the bathroom floor, in her nightgown, her legs curled up as if she had endured intense pain. A broken pill bottle lay on the floor, white pills scattered everywhere. Her hand loosely gripped a towel, and on the vanity was an open notebook with scribbled, unfinished notes. A chilling question arose. Did she fall, or did she choose this end? There were no signs of struggle, no signs of violence, but what had really happened in this room? The officers couldn't believe what they were seeing. Two people who had once been inseparable were now separated by a week of silence and oblivion. When they checked around, they noticed a strange detail. Hackman's 3 dogs were still alive, but one was not so lucky. A small dog lay dead in the corner of the kitchen, no signs of life left. The other 2 dogs, thin and frightened, ran and hid behind the officers as if they knew something terrible had happened. The coroner arrived quickly, but the police had a suspicion. Gene Hackman had likely passed away first, leaving Betsy alone in the silent house, and then she too had quietly passed. But what surprised them most wasn't what they found in the living room or bedroom, but in the basement. When an officer descended the stairs to investigate, the beam of his flashlight illuminated an old wooden door at the end of the hallway. This door wasn't in the house's blueprints, and when they opened it, a secret tunnel appeared before them. What lay inside left them breathless. When the forensic investigators began examining the bodies of Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa, the initial theories about their deaths were quickly challenged. Initially, the police suspected that Hackman may have passed away due to old age and the late stages of Alzheimer's disease. But what about Arakawa? She had died first, suddenly, with no signs of struggle, no indications of external force, just a frail body and a spilled bottle of pills on the floor. But when the forensic results came back, everything became even more terrifying. The initial conclusion was that Gene Hackman died from a heart attack. His Alzheimer's disease had weakened his body, and his cardiovascular condition had worsened over time. With no one there to care for him, he slowly passed away without any signs of external force. Hackman died quietly in his chair in the mudroom, possibly from exhaustion or a sudden heart attack. But the most terrifying part wasn't just that Hackman had passed away. It was the absolute loneliness he must have endured in his final days. When the forensic experts examined Betsy Arakawa's body more closely, they discovered a shocking detail. She had contracted a dangerous virus that could cause severe respiratory failure and damage to internal organs. This virus is typically transmitted through contact with the feces, urine, or saliva of infected rodents, or by inhaling the virus when particles from rodent feces are dispersed in the air, or through contaminated food and drink. What was terrifying about this virus is that it can develop in the human body without clear symptoms for several days, meaning that Betsy could have been infected earlier, but the disease only truly manifested on the final day. The symptoms of this virus include sudden high fever, severe difficulty breathing, muscle pain, prolonged fatigue, and rapid respiratory failure. When the forensic investigators checked the living conditions in the house, they found numerous signs of rodents, which could have been the source of Arakawa's infection. But the biggest unanswered question remained. When did she contract the disease? And more importantly, was this the primary cause of her death? Not only were Hackman and Arakawa affected, but all three of their dogs were also impacted. One dog died before the police arrived, with the cause remaining unclear. The other two dogs survived, but their health had significantly deteriorated, showing signs of dehydration and malnutrition. Veterinarians concluded that all three dogs exhibited signs of respiratory infection, possibly due to a virus spread through the air inside the house. But how could a luxurious and well-maintained mansion like this become the breeding ground for such a dangerous virus? As the FBI and the investigative team continued to search the house, they noticed something unusual. The basement seemed to be absent from the original blueprints. A police officer discovered an old wooden door in the basement, a door that wasn't in any of the house's building documents. And when they opened it, a dark tunnel appeared before them. The atmosphere immediately became heavy. What awaited them inside? With flashlights in hand, they took slow, cautious steps down the stairs, and when the light shone on the far wall of the tunnel, they froze. As the police continued to search through Gene Hackman's mansion, a heavy and strange atmosphere enveloped the entire house. What they saw didn't resemble the home of a Hollywood legend. It seemed more like a place abandoned for weeks. There were no signs of life, except for two exhausted dogs, rotting food in the kitchen, some food left untouched, and no sign that Hackman had eaten for several days before his death. This raised a major question. Had he completely exhausted himself before passing away? The forensic report revealed that Hackman hadn't eaten in a long time, with no food in his stomach. This indicated that he couldn't care for himself in the final days without Arakawa by his side. Hackman may have been completely disoriented due to his advanced Alzheimer's disease. He couldn't remember how to call for help, couldn't prepare meals, and couldn't understand his surroundings. And so, as the days passed, the mansion slowly turned into a deadly trap. Another suspicious discovery was that the house's air conditioning system was completely turned off. During the hot summer months in Santa Fe, the temperature inside the house could rise above 35 degrees, 95 degrees. Without ventilation, the air inside became thick and oxygen deprived. This stifling atmosphere might have caused Hackman to fall into a coma before he passed away. But why was the air conditioning turned off? Did Hackman forget to turn it on? Did Arakawa turn it off before leaving? Or was there another unexplored reason behind it? The police found no signs of a power outage, meaning the system was still functioning normally. Someone had intentionally turned it off, but who and why? What chilled the investigative team was the absence of any signs of everyday life. There were no new emails or messages on Hackman's phone, no visitors to the villa for weeks, and no grocery bills or food deliveries for over a month. The villa seemed to have been abandoned by Hackman, or perhaps he no longer had the ability to maintain a normal life. However, the greatest mystery lay in the basement. When one of the officers discovered an old wooden door in the basement, it was a door that wasn't in the original blueprints of the house. Why was it there? When they opened the door, a spiral staircase descended into the darkness. A strange smell rose from below, making the investigators shiver. They shone their flashlights down, and a hidden tunnel appeared. What lay inside left them stunned. Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa were not unfamiliar figures. They were once one of Hollywood's most famous couples, with friends in high places and fans following their every move. However, when they disappeared within their own home, no one noticed anything unusual. Why? Because they lived very privately. After Hackman retired in 2004, he completely withdrew from Hollywood, even turning down rare interview requests. He and Arakawa led a peaceful, quiet life with no social media, and family and friends rarely contacted them. Those close to them said Hackman became increasingly withdrawn, even from those closest to him. Neighbors didn't suspect anything. Hackman's estate was located in a secluded area of Santa Fe, and his lack of outings wasn't surprising, as he had maintained this habit for many years. Who was the first to uncover the truth? A maintenance worker was hired to check the house after no one answered the phone for several days. When he entered the estate, the world of Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa had fallen into eternal silence. Betsy Arakawa was found to have contracted the H virus, a dangerous virus transmitted through the feces or urine of rodents. But the strange thing was that there were no signs of mice or rodents in the house. Hackman was not infected by the virus. If there was a source of contamination in the house, why was Arakawa the only one affected? Some theories suggest that she might have contracted the disease during a recent trip, but credit card data shows she hadn't left Santa Fe for months before her death. Could someone have brought the virus into the house? But why? These questions remain unanswered, and the appearance of the H virus only adds to the mystery surrounding Betsy Arakawa's death. Gene Hackman is one of Hollywood's greatest actors, with a career spanning over 40 years, and iconic films such as Unforgiven, The French Connection, Superman, and The Royal Tenenbaums. However, after retiring, he virtually disappeared from the spotlight. He stopped attending award ceremonies, avoided events, and cut off contact with most of his old friends. The life of a man who once stood at the pinnacle of glory has now become that of an empty mansion and years of solitude in his final days. When Hackman passed away, there were no loved ones by his side, no grand memorial, no heartfelt eulogies from colleagues, just a silent house, an unsolved mystery, and a cinematic legacy that will endure forever. People will remember Gene Hackman as one of the greatest actors of all time, with 2 Oscars and dozens of classic films, or as a man who spent his final years in isolation, leaving the world without anyone knowing. The truth is that Hackman's story serves as a reminder of the fragility of life. No matter how brightly you shine, in the end, the most important thing is having someone by your side when the spotlight fades. For Gene Hackman, that light dimmed in an empty house, but his legacy will live on forever. The story of Gene Hackman and the secrets hidden beneath his mansion is sure to make you reflect. These strange discoveries not only reveal the darker corners of a Hollywood legend's life, but also raise unresolved questions full of mystery. What do you think about these secrets? Could they change the way we view Hackman and his private life? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your opinions. Don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next video, where we'll continue to explore mysterious stories and shocking discoveries. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. And don't forget to share this video with your friends so we can explore these mysterious things together that we never thought possible.